Elier Pilas is one of the youngest meteorologists in Cuba. He focused his career in weather forecast, extremely important in this country constantly hit by hurricanes. He's also a weatherman on TV, which is an extra challenge. In order to talk to him and understand how this works in Cuba, we went to the Institute of Meteorology, specifically to the Center of Weather Forecast, a historic building near the Havana Bay. Thank you so much, Elier, for being with us here on Telesur.
Thanks to you for the opportunity.
It's going to be an interesting conversation, and I wanted to start by listening your own experience on something which is very talked about when people refer to how Cuba faces hurricanes. It's very common when a hurricane comes through the Caribbean. Usually, Cuba is the country that suffers less than others in terms of human damage and material damage. And it's very interesting how in countries which are right beside Cuba, they're extremely affected. A lot of people die, and usually in terms of numbers and human impact, usually this country solves better and is able to predict better in order to not have that amount of loss or damage. What is different in this country that makes that possible?
Well, in Cuba, we can speak that we have a system that protects the people. Not only the civil defense is a system that works together from the first step, that is the weather information, the early warnings or the forecast, in this case of hurricane, and how this information is used by the government that put all the resources to protect in the first moment the human life, and after that to avoid the economic damage. But in Cuba we are an island, so it's very difficult to prevent that kind of economic damage because we have a lot of settlements right next to the shore. We have a lot of infrastructure that is always damaged, but in the case of the human life, we made a great improvement. And also because of the conscience of the people, the Cuban has a very good meteorological culture. They understand a lot of the information by themselves, and by the years they have been prepared. In the special case of the hurricane, they know how they must protect their belongings. In some cases, when you check the numbers of people that self-evacuate is almost the same that the ones are evacuated but another means, and usually they go to another sort of relative house, to friends. And also it's an important role in this system is the solidarity of the Cuban people, want to help each other, bringing her home to avoid the damage, to keep the belongings or some neighbors that came to their home to protect themselves if they have a poor house or a house with no condition to face.
That means that if you have a vulnerable house, you will go to your neighbor's house? Is that how it works?
Yes, most of the people, they take the measure by themselves, but as usual, with the orientation of the civil defense, that is the one who set the different phases of the hurricane, say the hurricane warning. They put first an informative phase, then a warning or watch phase, and after that they put the phase where the hurricane impact is imminent. Before that, the people usually take their own measures, and in some cases they move to near places because it's better, it's safer for them and for the goods also.
You told me in a previous interview something very interesting, which is a new challenge that you have. I mean, it's a very important issue that you have to deal with, and it's also your responsibility. The first step in this system is creating a conscience of risk into their people's minds. So although you can't provoke panic, you really need to give the people the impression that there's going to be a big danger that is coming over us, so you need to be prepared. The first step of that system is communication and goes through media, essentially. You are also a weatherman, and that requires a big responsibility, not only in hurricane season, but when you have to say, okay, tomorrow is going to rain or not, and people make plans around what you say. You studied to be a meteorologist, and being a weatherman on TV requires a different set of skills, and you need to know not only about your science, but about other things. In this sense, how hard it was to stand up in front of a camera, not reading with a prompter, just improvising this information, which is very scientific, and you need to translate that to the people. How hard was it?
Well, as I said, the Cubans have a very good meteorological culture, not now in the recent years, from the past. So when you stand in the front of a camera, they not only listen if it will be raining or will be sunny, they also listen to the explanation that you say, what are the seasons are in the weather in our area. And it's difficult in the way that you need to give it that information in a language not as popular, but not also as a scientist, because they need to understand what are you saying, but not in a way that you speak like everybody, because they need to realize that you have a person who knows, is a specialist in that area, who is explaining to you what will be happening. Cuba has a very good achievement in this aspect, because all the weathermen and women are actually meteorologists, are actually forecasters.
They're not anchors, they're professional meteorologists.
Yes, they work also as a forecaster in the National Center of Forecast, and they also present the weather. In other countries, there is a people who prepare for communicate, but it's not a specialist in the forecast, of maybe have some kind of shallow knowledge of what is talking about. In Cuba, we have the strength that when the people sees a specialist, they give some authority. In Cuba, for example, when we have a hurricane and we seeing how Dr. Jose Rubiera, the people know that it's maybe a serious situation. They measure the risk sometimes depending of who is communicating the information. In the everyday information, it doesn't matter, because the people only listen what they need for prepare for the day, for example.
Why did you decide to become a meteorologist?
I am part of the Cuban meteorological culture. As a child, maybe 20 years ago, with no internet, no digital media, we only have in the hurricane season, we only have information from the TV. I use a map and I plot not only the track of the hurricane, but also the forecast tracks, and I like that information, and I like to study how they know what will happen, because now I realize that it's pretty hard to say what will happen tomorrow. So it will be harder to say what will happen 3 or 5 days. And the curiosity for that, analyzing for how we can get that info was what made me. In my case, I was lucky, because from around 20 years, the meteorology formed abroad in the former Soviet Union, and after that they came from other careers as physics and geography. And when I finished my high school, there was re-up again the meteorologist career in the university. So I was lucky to participate in the second course Yeah, now there is around 10 more graduation of meteorologists here in Cuba, taught by our own specialists.
Is when you graduate as a meteorologist, there are a lot of things that you can do. But being a forecaster has a big responsibility, essentially, when you're on camera explaining that. When you say something and that forecast didn't really happen, and people talk to you on the streets, and Cubans are very communicative, so they tell you when they disagree. How is your reaction? How has been that relation between people that watch on TV? Essentially, when your forecast is not precise, which is very common, this is not an exact science. How is that interaction?
Well, when you stand at the camera, you are the face of a group that made the forecast, a good or bad forecast. And after that, you are also the face of in one moment of all the meteorology in Cuba. And the people actually, they are very communicative, and with their knowledge, in some cases they don't have the same culture, but they want to know. For example, now we are almost beginning the hurricane season. They want to know how many hurricanes we are going to forecast for this year, for this season. And also they comment a lot of for example, yesterday you said they take it very personal. You said that there was a sunny day, will be a sunny day, and in the afternoon I went with my family and rains a lot. In some cases, at the office, the people calls to have the forecast for a familiar event, a party, something that are going to be not indoors, and they want to know what will be the forecast for that day. I mean, in some cases they want to know the forecast for a month in the future. That is also very difficult.
What's the kind of system that you have set here for cases of emergencies? For example, and remember, this is a show that is quite watched in the Caribbean countries, essentially, of course, in the English-speaking countries. And in the case a hurricane is approaching, what do you do? What is it that you do if you're at home? What's your role? What is it that the Center for Forecast does in those occasions?
Well, when we have a hint of, we are maybe in a period of 3 to 5 days in danger of being affected by the hurricane, we usually set an early warning to the government. That is who coordinates all the measures for the movement of the resources and planning in case that the threat will be real. Because after 5 days, there's a lot of uncertainty of how will happen. And after that, when the danger for Cuba is imminent, then even the TV studios move here to the National Forecast Center. We transmit live all the time here from the National Forecast Center, where we have the information right next, because one office is right next to the other, and that gives also people a hint about the danger. When they notice that the forecast is not longer at the TV studio, the forecast is made and is submitted from the National Forecast Center, they take it more seriously also. And it's also an aspect that the people measure the real risk that we have in the case of a hurricane.
There's a lot of international attention over climate change and how we can read that in the everyday events. In your own experience, have you seen a real change in climate over the last 10 years that you've been a forecaster? Do you think that we can interpret that as a sign of that the climate is actually changing?
Well, I personally think that climate change is a reality, but even in the Atlantic, that we have a long data of hurricane tracks from the 19th century to nowadays, you cannot say that it's increasing the number of hurricanes or the intensity, but we are preparing to face a change, because maybe not, we don't have more hurricanes, because that depends from other things, but in climate change maybe bring us bigger major hurricanes in the intensity, and also maybe hurricanes that keep its intensity for a long period. For example, Irma last year was set a record, because usually hurricanes don't keep the peak intensity of, in this case, category 5 for more than 12 hours. Irma was almost 1 day and a half, was a category 5 hurricane, very strong. This maybe we are seeing a case that maybe is, we see around 100 years to repeat, but we need to have more data. We need to have more season to see if there is a pattern of actually increasing the number of hurricanes. Cuba in the last maybe 5 years have this streak of hurricanes. In 2012 we have Sandy, in 2016 we have Matthew, and the last year we have Irma. But it's not a tendency, because if you see all the historical data of the hurricane, Cuba is in the middle of the cloud of tracks. We always will be in danger every hurricane season, even if there is maybe not an active season.
You were mentioning how important was in communicating the size of the risk, how important was where you do the forecast, if it's here or in a TV studio, or when they see Dr. Jose Rubiera, which is probably the most known in Cuba weatherman. So you are a young meteorologist and a forecaster in a country with a long tradition of forecasters and people who are very good, not only Rubiera, but others who are very good at communicating science, your science. How do you feel about having that long tradition, that long heritage, and moving forward? Do you feel that your generation is prepared? Do you honor that those older generations that opened the path of TV weather forecasts on TV?
I see that we have a very good crew of weathermen and also women, because even younger than me, I think that they are prepared to face that, not only the everyday forecast, but also in some case of dangerous weather events, not only hurricanes. We have maybe another weather event that they are actually dangerous and they are not hurricanes, because hurricane is maybe easier because people have paid more attention and they usually know all the phases and they know exactly how everything will flow. It depends of the danger that we are facing. But I think that maybe the most important challenge that we have for the future, not for in terms of generation, is that 10 years ago the people only have the forecast from Cuba, from the TV, but now people have internet.
Is that a challenge? The fact that people can watch by themselves and believe that they know how to interpret the data?
Yes, I think that we need to get what is good for that, from that situation. Now with Irma, we live a case where the people actually they can check that the information that we use, because it's published in international websites. Information not only for the public, information for specialists. For example, the forecast tracks of a hurricane, they are made by numerical models, and they have the opportunity to check that information to consult it the same as we use, and that maybe give us the chance to teach the people what they are seeing, because maybe the danger, the problem is that if they don't know what they are seeing, maybe they get the wrong interpretation. I think that maybe like in the past, when, for example, we have for the first time the satellite images in the TV, we teach the people what means in every aspect in the satellite image to recognize what is the, for example, the most intense rain, where are the risk, where are, how it's a hurricane seen in the satellite image. Now we need to teach the people in the case of Cuba, because every day we are opening more and more to the internet and to the world how to consult that information, and also still being the voice of Cuban meteorology for the people, because maybe you can there is nothing wrong that you can check all the information, but you need to follow one voice, because that is one of the aspects that bring us to that point where we have less casualties, more or less casualties than any other countries in the area. I remember in the case of Hurricane Matthew, I live the forecast of Matthew here, working at the Institute, and after 2 or 3 days after the hurricane, when there was the confirmation there was no casualties in the hurricane for Category 4, I was surprised. Somebody maybe called that a miracle, but we can call it maybe it's the product of the whole system that works correctly in that case to prevent the human loss.
Thank you so much, Elier. It's been a pleasure listening to you, and all the success in the future for you.
In my case, it's also a pleasure to share with you some this moment, these minutes.
Thank you.